Packers, bonjour, shalom, namaste, assalamu alaikum, ni hao, bienvenidos. I hope you are well. I hope you had a restful Memorial Day weekend, possibly a successful Eid, the end of Ramadan. Um, so, a lot of things have been going on in a lot of people's lives. I hope you are well. Certainly is a wild time, a lot going on in a lot of different ways. Wish we were together. I really do. But we're going to make the best of the situation that we find ourselves in. So, this is finals week, and we're going to go over some of the details of it. I want a quick note for all my athletes out there. Summer speed and strength will happen, right? So, if you reach out to your varsity coach, there is a summer speed and strength program that we are in the works of figuring out exactly what it's going to look like. But obviously, it's going to be important for a lot of us to have a strong exercise, fitness, strength, and conditioning component to our summer so that we don't get stuck into a TikTok vortex and we look up and that's all we've done all day. It's okay to do that once in a while, but we certainly want to have some strong habits here. So, quick note for that. The want to stay positive for the most part because it is a positive time. There's a lot of good things going on, but do need to make a note of the timely discussion of our civil rights, right? So we've spent the last 2 weeks, including this week now, the third week, on the civil rights of different groups in America. And without getting too far back into the history of it, we know from Unit 3 that the Constitution, because of the Bill of Rights, guarantees people that are arrested certain basic rights, right? Freedom from cruel and unusual punishment, trial by jury, a swift and speedy trial. The people who built this country were really focused on what are called the rights of the accused, right? That is, the rights of people who have been accused of doing something. And they really wanted to carve out space to protect people in those situations because they had seen that abused by the British, right, during that. So this is old stuff. This is Unit 2 stuff. But the reason I bring all that up, right, is we know that Minneapolis, Minnesota, right, is home to this really big, unfortunate event. Everybody would agree it was super unfortunate, or you can use your own words there. But there was a man who right now we think was suspected of forgery and was apprehended by the police and died because of, it appears, the evidence thus far would suggest dies because of the way that he was taken into custody. And those 4 officers have been fired. So that's a really sad, sad way to come to an end of a year. People are obviously emotionally fragile with all this pandemic stuff, but it's important to speak this event into being, to note that it's going on really in our backyard, and to trace its history through the way that different groups of people have been treated, in particular, right, by the police in certain cases. Depending on how your research went, you may have seen some examples of that. This is certainly not an indictment on all people who are serving our communities in law enforcement in other ways. In the same way that when a teacher, we all know teachers have done terrible things in other places, and that breaks my heart, but I don't take it as an offense to me. I take it as an offense to all people. So it's important that you take a look at that story. It's important that you think about it now in the context of the civil rights stuff that we've studied. But the other thing that I want to talk on is Robben Island. So this is the do now, the bell ringer. So this guy's name is Nelson Mandela. And if you have to go to work, that's what you need to know. Nelson Mandela. He was trying to create a right to vote for African people in South Africa, black African people in his home country of South Africa. He was imprisoned. I'm going to gloss over some stuff, but he was imprisoned because he wanted to do that. And a big chunk of his imprisonment was in this cell. And he was a guy who was actually like an amateur boxer. He loved to box. That was his sport. So he took fitness pretty seriously, but he would go on quote unquote runs in this cell. Now, he wasn't in this particular cell for all 30 years, but for the vast majority of it, he was on an island prison called Robben Island in a cell like this, where his only exercise was to jog in place, right? And there's not really anything else in this cell that I didn't get in the picture, but I got to visit his cell when I went to Robben Island in college. And I bring that up because a lot of us are kind of frustrated. A lot of us are at our wits' end. A lot of us are feeling robbed of different school events, sports events, activities, performances, awards, these sorts of things. And that's real. Um, and we feel kind of trapped, right, by these expectations, or we're frustrated at what other people are doing or not doing or saying or not saying. And so we feel kind of trapped, right? And the key here is that we are not alone throughout history. People have felt that for long periods of time, right? I said Nelson Mandela was in prison for over 30 years simply for suggesting that all people be treated equal. So I say this, and what did he do when he left prison? He was elected the first black South African president and really the first ever real democratic election in South Africa's history. And he went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize and a bunch of really cool things. But for those of you that are trapped in mental cells, right, just know that history, Nelson Mandela, and others stand right there with you, and that it doesn't last forever. And so, as we're transitioning, as we're doing different things, keep those historical pieces in mind. And now, really quickly, we know this week we have a final, which is going to be just like the last 2 weeks. Please also do the reflection that I'm going to ask you to do on Friday. Next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, is essentially like a study hall if you need it. If you like your grade, you're fine. If you have some work to do, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is a time to set up Google Meets, etc. So what does your final look like? It's going to be the same format. You're going to choose a topic that you're interested in. That's the key. More details to follow. You're going to do research on that one source, that one topic. If the 5 W's have worked for you, taking notes, continue to do that. If you want to do your own style of notes, that's fine too. And then you'll choose a learning activity. We've talked about paragraph writing, art, digital flashcards, digital posters. Now, if you want to go creative and you want to make a movie, you want to write a poem, you want to take the skill that you learned during your personal project and apply that here, that's all fine. I want you to have fun with it. It's your last week. I want you to do something that you're going to be proud of, or that's within the right realm of you to be able to get it done with respect to all your work. Now, you're going to choose the topic. So we did African Americans the first week. We did the Latino, Hispanic, Latinx community the second week. Now you choose the topic or the group or the what I oftentimes call the traditionally marginalized group. So one of the research options I'm going to give you is women. There's plenty of research there on everything from Title IX to go ahead looking at why the U.S. women's soccer team feels it should be paid as much or more than the U.S. men's soccer team, because it's not. The LGBTQ community, right? Again, research provided, whether you want to look at the Supreme Court case that said everybody in America has the right to marry someone else in 2015, or whether you want to look at a more historical event. Americans with disabilities, right? So this goes with everything from ADHD all the way to these people whose legs don't work, right? Like your legs might work. And they wanted a law that said that they need to have access, just like everybody else, to everything else. So these are really hard to watch protests where they would crawl up the steps of state and national capitals because while you can't find a building without wheelchair access of some kind, public building, back then there were some buildings where they just said, if you're in a wheelchair, you just can't get in. Sorry. Or if you're in school and you have dyslexia, so reading is a big challenge for you, they just said, well, suck it up, right? But the Americans with Disabilities Act tried to carve out legal space guaranteeing those people equal rights. Muslim Americans, particularly after 9/11, faced a lot of unfair discrimination. Certainly we know of, unfortunately, lots of documented cases of racism towards Asian Americans in light of the COVID virus. Those would be examples of things you could research. Jewish Americans, the Nazi rally in New York City in the 1930s. What was it like for the Jewish community there or today? Even Irish Americans were discriminated against when they first began to arrive in large numbers in the 1800s. There are plenty of other groups that you can choose that you might be thinking of. Just let me know what those groups are. So you'll choose those topics. you'll if you choose women or LGBTQ, there'll be research for you. If you choose one of these other topics, you'll be in charge of your own research. And then you'll follow the same format. Taking notes, the learning activity, you'll choose which one fits you best. And then, of course, just the brief reminder that there's diversity within groups. So just like when I say teenagers, there are very few things that are true about all teenagers. Certainly there are some issues, but teenager is a pretty diverse group. And of course, the same is true with all of these groups. African American, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, into these groups here. We just want to make sure that we're studying without stereotyping. I'm not accusing anyone, I'm just putting that as a reminder in your brain. And then I already sent this message out about the grading, not change, but the grading option that you have. So go to your Schoology messages and watch that video and reread this and reach out if you have any questions. So definitely going to be reaching out to you with an update on Thursday, and available all week. I sent out a message about late work. Reach out with questions about that. And yeah, this was just, this is a day that I wish we were sitting in class so we could talk about all these interesting things and talk about your plans for the summer and talk about all those different things. But remember, you're not alone. You're not alone in feeling trapped sometimes, and that good things can really come after that, can come despite that. Reach out to your varsity coaches about summer speed and strength, and do take care. I miss you. Reach out if you need help. Take care.